My rich parents called my wife inappropriate for our family because her dad worked as a janitor and disowned me when I married her anyway, but after 3 years of silence they arrived unannounced with baby presents expecting to be grandparents. My 32M wife Alyssa, 29F, is 5 months pregnant with our first child, and suddenly my parents showed up at our door after 3 years of complete silence. They acted like nothing happened. They brought baby gifts and expected to walk right back into our lives. I refused to let them inside, and that decision has caused problems I did not see coming. I need to start from the beginning to explain why this situation exists. I grew up as an only child in a family that had money and status. My father, 61M, owned a successful investment firm, and my mother, 58F, spent her time organizing charity galas and sitting on museum boards. Our house had staff who prepared meals and maintained the grounds. I attended private schools where most of my classmates had similar backgrounds. My childhood was comfortable but strict. My parents expected certain behaviors and I delivered them without question. When I turned 26, I met Alyssa at a friend's wedding. She worked as a nurse at a children's hospital and came from a completely different background. Her father had worked various jobs throughout his life, including cleaning offices at corporate buildings. Her mother was a seamstress who took on alterations from home. They lived in a modest neighborhood about 40 minutes from where I grew up. Despite having less money than my family, they owned their home outright and raised 3 daughters who all went to state universities on scholarships and loans. Alyssa and I started dating, and within a few months I knew she was different from anyone I had met before. She worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital and still found time to visit her parents every Sunday for dinner. She helped her younger sister study for nursing school exams and drove her middle sister to job interviews when her car broke down. When I joined those Sunday dinners, her parents welcomed me without asking what my father did for work or where I went to school. They asked about my interests and made jokes about my terrible cooking skills after I admitted I had never learned to use a stove properly. After 6 months of dating, I introduced Alyssa to my parents at a formal dinner at their house. The evening started well enough. My mother complimented Alyssa's dress and my father asked polite questions about her work at the hospital. Then my mother asked about Alyssa's family background. Alyssa explained that her father had recently retired after working as a building maintenance supervisor. She mentioned he had started as a cleaner decades ago and worked his way up to managing a team. The temperature in the room dropped immediately. My mother's smile became fixed and artificial. My father changed the subject quickly and spent the rest of dinner talking about a recent art acquisition. When Alyssa excused herself to use the bathroom, my mother leaned across the table and asked if I was serious about this relationship. She said Alyssa seemed nice but came from an inappropriate background for our family. My father added that I should consider what people in their social circle would think. I did not argue with them that night. I took Alyssa home and she asked if the dinner had gone badly. I lied and said everything was fine. But over the next few weeks my parents called repeatedly. They invited me to lunch without Alyssa. They suggested I attend events where they could introduce me to daughters of their friends. My mother sent me articles about successful young women from prominent families. The message was clear without them stating it directly. 8 months into our relationship I decided to propose to Alyssa. I bought a ring and planned a simple proposal at the park where we had our first date. I did not tell my parents beforehand because I knew what they would say. Alyssa accepted and we celebrated with her family that same evening. Her parents opened a bottle of champagne they had been saving and her sisters cried and hugged us both. It was one of the best nights of my life. I waited 2 days before telling my parents. I drove to their house on a Sunday morning and found them having breakfast on the terrace. When I showed them photos from the proposal, my mother set down her coffee cup and stared at me. My father asked if I had lost my mind. He said I was throwing away my future for a woman who would never fit into our world. My mother said Alyssa was using me for money and status. I tried to defend Alyssa but my father interrupted. He said if I married her, I was no longer their son. I stood up and left without saying another word. My mother called after me but I did not turn around. That was 3 years ago. They did not attend our wedding 8 months later. Alyssa's parents paid for most of the ceremony since my trust fund had been cut off and I was still establishing my career. Some guests asked where my parents were and I gave vague answers about scheduling conflicts. Alyssa's father walked her down the aisle and gave a speech at the reception about how proud he was to gain a son. My parents and I had no contact for 3 years. I built my career as a financial consultant and Alyssa continued working at the hospital until her pregnancy required her to switch to lighter duties. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood halfway between both our workplaces. Life moved forward without them in it. I did not call on holidays and they did not reach out. It was as if we had mutually agreed to erase each other. Then Alyssa entered her second trimester and we announced the pregnancy on social media. We posted a photo of the ultrasound with a simple caption about expecting our first child in 4 months. I did not think my parents would see it since they rarely use those platforms. But someone from their social circle must have shown them because 2 days later my phone rang with my mother's number. I stared at it for several rings before answering. My mother spoke as if no time had passed. She congratulated me on the baby news and asked how Alyssa was feeling. She said she and my father wanted to visit. I asked why she was calling after 3 years of silence. She said they had given me time to mature and now with a grandchild coming they wanted to repair the relationship. I told her we would need to discuss this further and ended the call. Alyssa asked who had called and I explained the situation. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said maybe we should give them a chance. She said the baby deserved to know all of its grandparents. I reminded her how they had treated her and treated us. She said people could change and maybe they regretted their actions. I told her I would think about it but made no promises. The following Saturday morning someone knocked on our front door. I opened it to find my parents standing on the porch holding shopping bags filled with baby items. My mother tried to hug me and I stepped back. My father said they wanted to see the house and talk about the future. I told them they could not come inside. My mother looked shocked. She said they had driven an hour to see us and brought gifts for their grandchild. I replied that showing up unannounced did not erase 3 years of nothing. My father's face hardened. He said I was being disrespectful and ungrateful. I pointed out that they had disowned me for marrying the woman I loved. My mother said they were here now and that should count for something. I said if they wanted any relationship with us or the baby they needed to apologize properly. Not show up with presents and expect everything to be forgotten. My mother said their presence was the apology. I disagreed. The conversation grew louder. My father said I had embarrassed them by marrying beneath our status and now I was denying them access to their only grandchild. I told them their grandchild would not know grandparents who could not treat his mother with basic respect. My mother started crying. She said I had changed and was not the son she raised. I told her the son she raised would have done what she wanted instead of what was right. Then I closed the door. Alyssa had heard everything from the living room. She came to the hallway and asked why I sent them away. I explained that they had not apologized and seemed to think appearing with gifts was enough. Alyssa said maybe I was being too harsh. She said they were trying even if their attempt was clumsy. I told her I was protecting her and our child from people who thought we were not good enough for them. She went upstairs without responding. That night Alyssa barely spoke to me. She prepared dinner in silence and ate quickly before going to bed early. I sat in the living room thinking about what had happened. My parents had not acknowledged hurting us. They had not admitted they were wrong. They simply showed up and expected me to fall in line like I always had before Alyssa. The next morning Alyssa said she felt caught between me and my parents. She said she did not want to be the reason I had no relationship with them. I told her she was not the reason. They were the reason. They chose to cut me off and now they wanted back in without doing the work. She asked what I wanted from them. I said a real apology to her. An acknowledgement that they were wrong to judge her and wrong to disown me. She asked if I would ever forgive them even if they apologized. I said I did not know but I would not forgive them without it. Since that weekend my phone has had dozens of missed calls from both parents. They have sent text messages saying I am being unreasonable and cruel. My mother sent a long message about how she carried me for 9 months and sacrificed her career to raise me. My father sent one saying I was behaving like a child instead of a man about to become a father. I have not responded to any of them. Alyssa has been distant. She still talks to me and we go through our daily routines but something has shifted. Yesterday she mentioned that her parents said they would support whatever decision we made about my parents. I know she is trying to tell me something without directly saying it. I think she believes I should let them visit and try to rebuild things slowly. But every time I consider it I remember my mother calling Alyssa inappropriate and my father saying she would never fit into our world. I am writing this because I genuinely do not know if I am handling this correctly. My wife thinks I am being too hard on them. My parents think I am being disrespectful and keeping their grandchild from them. But I cannot forget that they threw me away for loving someone they considered beneath us. And now they want to come back because there is a baby involved. Not because they realized they were wrong about Alyssa. Not because they missed me. Because they want access to their grandchild. Am I wrong for refusing to let them back in without a proper apology? Should I accept that them showing up is enough effort? I need perspective on this because my house has become tense and uncomfortable and I am about to become a father myself. I do not want my child growing up in a family filled with this kind of conflict, but I also do not want to teach him that you should accept people back into your life when they have never admitted they hurt you. Update 1: I did not expect the response my post received. Hundreds of people shared their own stories about family rifts and difficult relationships. Most agreed that my parents needed to actually apologize instead of just appearing with gifts. A few people said I should consider forgiveness for the baby's sake. I read everything and tried to figure out what was right. The 3 weeks since my original post have been difficult. Alyssa and I had several conversations about my parents. She maintained that maybe I should give them one chance to explain themselves. She said shutting them out completely seemed extreme. I asked if she had forgotten how they treated her. She said she had not forgotten, but she also believed people could change when motivated by the right reasons. I disagreed. I told her I thought they only cared about the baby and still looked down on her. She stopped bringing it up after that conversation. My parents continued calling and texting. My mother sent messages about baby furniture she wanted to buy. My father sent articles about setting up college funds and trust accounts for grandchildren. Neither of them mentioned apologizing or acknowledging what they had done 3 years ago. It was as if that entire chapter had been erased from their memory and we were simply having a minor disagreement about visiting schedules. 2 weeks after my original post, my phone rang during my lunch break at work. It was my father. He did not wait for me to say hello. He launched into a speech about family obligations and how I was the only son and needed to stop this nonsense. He said there could be a medical emergency or serious situation and I was behaving like a stubborn teenager. I asked what the emergency was. He said there was no current emergency but there could be one in the future. I told him to call an ambulance if that happened and ended the call. That Saturday my doorbell rang at 10 in the morning. I looked through the window and saw my parents' car in the driveway again. This time I did not answer. They rang the bell 4 more times. Then I heard my mother's voice through the door saying she knew we were home because both our cars were there. She said they just wanted to talk like civilized people. I stayed silent on the other side of the door. After 15 minutes they left. But Alyssa had been upstairs and heard everything. She came down and said we needed to talk. She said she understood why I was angry at them but keeping them at the door felt cruel. She reminded me that her own parents had welcomed me despite our different backgrounds and maybe I should show similar grace. I pointed out that her parents had not spent 3 years pretending I did not exist. She said that was true but turning my parents away repeatedly was creating stress she did not need while pregnant. That comment stopped me. I had not considered how this situation was affecting her physically. She was dealing with pregnancy symptoms and job stress and now my family drama on top of everything. I told her I would think about what to do next. She nodded and went back upstairs. The following week my mother called Alyssa directly. I did not know about this until Alyssa told me that evening. My mother had asked how she was feeling and what the doctor had said at recent appointments. Then she asked if Alyssa could convince me to let them visit. Alyssa said she would try but could not make promises. My mother thanked her and said she had always liked Alyssa despite what I might think. Alyssa seemed confused by that statement. When she asked what my mother meant, my mother said they could discuss it when they saw each other in person. I was furious when Alyssa told me this. I said my mother was trying to manipulate her by being sweet and concerned. Alyssa said maybe my mother genuinely wanted to fix things. I asked why she had not tried to fix things for 3 years. Alyssa had no answer for that. 2 days ago my parents showed up again. This time Alyssa answered the door before I could stop her. She invited them inside. I came down the stairs to find them sitting in our living room. My mother had tears in her eyes looking at Alyssa's pregnant belly. My father stood up when I entered and extended his hand. I did not shake it. I asked Alyssa why she had let them in. She said we needed to have this conversation and stop avoiding it. For the first time in 3 years we all sat in the same room. Nobody spoke for a long minute. Then my father cleared his throat and said they wanted to explain their position from 3 years ago. I said I was not interested in explanations. I wanted an apology. My mother said they were getting to that, but I needed to understand where they were coming from. I told them I understood perfectly. They thought Alyssa was not good enough because her father cleaned buildings for a living. My mother flinched but my father pressed on. He said they had worked hard to build their wealth and social position. They had concerns about people who might want access to that wealth for wrong reasons. He said when I first brought Alyssa home they worried she was a gold digger. I laughed. I actually laughed at that statement. Alyssa made more money as a nurse than I did in my first 2 years as a consultant. She had never asked me for anything. She insisted on paying her share of dates even when I offered to cover everything. My mother jumped in. She said they realized later they were wrong about Alyssa. She said Alyssa had proven to be hardworking and devoted. But by then I had already cut them off and they did not know how to bridge the gap. I pointed out that phones work both ways. They could have called any time in 3 years. My father said they were respecting my wishes for space. I said that was a convenient excuse. Alyssa spoke up then. She thanked my mother for the kind words but said those words came 3 years too late. She said if they had truly changed their minds about her they would have reached out long before learning about the pregnancy. She said it was clear they were here for their grandchild and not to repair their relationship with us. My mother started crying again. She insisted they did miss us and wanted us back in their lives. Alyssa asked why they had missed us so much yet never sent a single message or card for birthdays or holidays. My father stood up. He said this was going nowhere and they should leave. My mother protested. She said they came here to make peace and we were not giving them a fair chance. I asked what a fair chance looked like to her. She said we should start fresh and move forward instead of dwelling on the past. I told her the past was the foundation we were standing on and pretending it did not exist solved nothing. They left shortly after that. The bags of baby gifts stayed on our floor where my mother had set them down. Alyssa and I sat in silence after their car pulled away. Then she said she was glad she had let them in because now she understood what I had been protecting her from. She said hearing my father call her a potential gold digger made her realize they had never respected her. They had only tolerated her absence. Now that a grandchild was coming, they were willing to tolerate her presence. We threw the gifts in the garage. Neither of us wanted them in the house. Update 2: I am writing this update because the situation has evolved in ways I did not anticipate. Alyssa is now 7 months pregnant and doing well physically. Our relationship has gotten stronger since my parents' last visit. We have not heard from them in 2 months and honestly the silence has been good for us. About 3 weeks ago, Alyssa's younger sister Colette got engaged. Her fiancé is a teacher at the same school where Colette works as a counselor. The family was excited and planned a celebration dinner at Alyssa's parents' house. We attended and spent the evening eating too much food and looking at Colette's ring. Alyssa's father gave a toast about love being the only requirement for marriage, and everyone raised their glasses. It felt like a direct contrast to how my family had handled my engagement. During the drive home, Alyssa said she was grateful for her family. She said even though they did not have money, they had never made her feel less than anyone else. She said her parents cared more about who she married than what that person's bank account looked like. I agreed and said I was lucky to have been accepted by them. The next week I received an email from my father. He did not use the usual family email. He sent it from his work account. The email was formal and brief. He said my mother wanted to try one more time to connect with us. He said they understood we were angry but hoped we could find a path forward before the baby arrived. He asked if I would agree to a phone call with just my mother and Alyssa. He said maybe without me and him in the conversation the two of them could talk more openly. I showed Alyssa the email and she surprised me by saying she would do it. I asked if she was sure. She said she wanted to hear what my mother had to say without my father backing her up. I said I would not stop her, but I also would not expect anything good to come from it. She scheduled a call for the following evening. I went to the garage to work on a project while they talked. The call lasted almost an hour. When Alyssa came to find me, her face was hard to read. She said my mother had apologized during the call. She said my mother admitted treating her badly and judging her based on her family background. She said my mother claimed she had spent 3 years thinking about what she had lost when I cut them off. Alyssa said my mother cried several times during the conversation. But then Alyssa said something that made me pause. She said my mother had also blamed my father for most of the harsh comments and attitudes. She said my mother claimed she had wanted to reach out sooner but my father had forbidden it. I did not believe that story. I told Alyssa my mother had been just as cruel in her comments about Alyssa's background. Alyssa said she remembered that too, but people sometimes rewrote history in their minds to make themselves feel better. I asked if Alyssa believed the apology was real. She said parts of it seemed genuine but parts felt like my mother was performing contrition rather than feeling it. We decided to wait and see what happened next. My father sent another email asking if the call had gone well. I did not respond. A week later my mother sent Alyssa a text message asking if she could visit alone. Just her. She promised my father would not come. Alyssa asked what I thought. I said it was her decision since my mother wanted to see her. Alyssa agreed to a short visit at a coffee shop near her hospital. Neutral ground. They met yesterday afternoon. I did not go, but Alyssa gave me a full report when she got home. My mother had brought a small gift. A baby blanket she said she had knitted herself. Alyssa said she did not know my mother could knit. My mother apparently laughed and said she had taken it up recently to fill time. They talked about the pregnancy and Alyssa's plans for maternity leave. Then my mother brought up me. She asked if I would ever forgive her. Alyssa said she did not know, but I needed to hear a real apology that acknowledged specific harm instead of vague regrets. My mother asked Alyssa what she should apologize for specifically. Alyssa listed several things. Calling her inappropriate for our family. Suggesting she was a gold digger. Refusing to attend our wedding. Cutting me off financially and emotionally. Spending 3 years acting like we did not exist. My mother listened and said she had not realized how deep the damage went. Alyssa said that was part of the problem. My mother and father had hurt us without apparently understanding what they were doing. The conversation ended with my mother asking if she could attend the baby's birth. Alyssa said absolutely not. She said the birth would be stressful enough without adding family drama. My mother asked if she could visit afterward at the hospital. Alyssa said she would discuss it with me. Then she left. Alyssa came home and told me everything. She said my mother seemed different when my father was not around. She seemed softer and more willing to admit fault. But Alyssa also said she was not sure if that was real or just an act. I asked what she wanted to do. She said she did not want my parents at the hospital when she gave birth. She said she did not want that day clouded by tension. But she said maybe after we brought the baby home we could consider one supervised visit. I said I would think about it. Last night Alyssa and I talked for a long time about what we wanted for our son. We agreed we did not want him growing up around people who thought his mother was beneath them. We also agreed we did not want to carry anger forever. But we could not agree on whether my mother's recent efforts meant anything real. Alyssa thought my mother might actually regret what happened. I thought my mother regretted losing access to her grandchild but did not actually regret how she treated Alyssa. This morning Alyssa went for a regular checkup and everything looked good with the baby. While she was at the appointment my father called me. I answered because I was curious what he wanted. He said he knew my mother had been reaching out to Alyssa. He said he thought that was a mistake. He said Alyssa was manipulating the situation by keeping my mother and me apart. I hung up immediately. Then I blocked his number. I called Alyssa and told her what my father had said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she was done giving them chances. She said anyone who thought she was manipulating the situation did not deserve to meet her son. She said we should cut off all contact and focus on our own family. I agreed. We have not heard from my parents since I blocked my father's number. My mother has not attempted to text Alyssa again. I assume my father told her to stop. We are 2 months away from our son's birth and making plans that do not include my parents anywhere in them. Alyssa's parents are excited to be grandparents and have already set up a nursery at their house for when we visit. They are the family our son will know. Update 3: Our son Matthew was born 6 weeks ago. Labor was long, but Alyssa handled it better than I did. Her parents came to the hospital the day after he was born and spent hours holding him and taking photos. My parents did not know about the birth until Alyssa posted a photo on social media 3 days later. My mother called within an hour of that post going up. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message saying congratulations and asking when they could visit. I deleted it without responding. 2 days later a package arrived at our house. Inside was an expensive baby monitor and a card from my parents. The card said they were sorry for everything and wanted to be part of their grandson's life. Alyssa put the box in the garage with the other gifts we never used. The first month with Matthew was exhausting but good. He woke up every 2 hours to eat and Alyssa and I took turns getting up with him. Her parents visited twice a week and brought food so we did not have to cook. They held Matthew while Alyssa napped and never asked about my parents. It was peaceful. 3 weeks after Matthew's birth my mother showed up at our door. I was home alone with the baby because Alyssa had gone to a follow-up doctor appointment. My mother rang the bell and then knocked when I did not answer immediately. I looked through the window and saw her standing there with another gift bag. I did not open the door. She knocked again. Matthew was sleeping and I did not want him to wake up, so I opened the door partway. My mother tried to push past me. I blocked her with my arm and told her to leave. She said she just wanted to see her grandson for 5 minutes. I said no. She started crying and said she had spent weeks trying to fix things and I would not let her. I told her she had spent 3 years not trying to fix things and a few weeks of effort did not erase that. She asked what more I wanted from her. I said I wanted her to leave my porch. She called me cruel. Then she left. Alyssa came home 20 minutes later and I told her what happened. She asked if I was okay. I said I was tired of this cycle. They would leave us alone for a while then show up with gifts expecting access. Alyssa said we needed to send them a clear message that this was not going to work. She suggested we write them a letter explaining our boundaries. I said they had proven they did not respect boundaries. Alyssa said we should try one more time to communicate clearly and then be done with it. We wrote the letter together. We explained that their attempts to reconnect had come too late. We said we could not trust people who had disappeared for 3 years and only returned when a grandchild appeared. We said Matthew would grow up knowing his maternal grandparents who had always treated us with respect and love. We said we would not expose him to grandparents who might one day decide he was not good enough if he made choices they disagreed with. We said we were closing this door permanently and asked them not to contact us again. We mailed it 2 weeks ago. My father responded with a lawyer's letter. The letter said they were exploring their grandparent rights and might pursue legal visitation. Alyssa panicked when we got that letter. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in family law. He said grandparent rights in our state were limited and required proving that denying access would harm the child. Since Matthew was only a few weeks old and had never met them, there was no established relationship to protect. The lawyer said their threat was likely empty, but we should document all contact attempts in case they actually filed something. We started keeping records. Every call, every text, every package that arrived. We photographed my mother on our porch. We saved the lawyer's letter. Our own lawyer said we were building a solid case that my parents were harassing us rather than trying to establish a healthy relationship with their grandchild. Last week my mother sent Alyssa a long text message. She said my father had sent the lawyer's letter without her knowledge. She said she was furious at him for threatening legal action. She said she wanted to meet Alyssa for coffee one more time without any expectations. Alyssa showed me the message and asked what I thought. I said I thought my mother was trying to play good cop after my father played bad cop. Alyssa said maybe, but she was curious what my mother would say. I told her to do what she thought was right, but I would not be joining them. They met yesterday. Alyssa recorded the conversation on her phone in case my mother said something we needed documented. My mother apparently spent the first 10 minutes apologizing again. Then she said something that surprised Alyssa. She said she was leaving my father. She said the past few months had shown her that he cared more about being right than about having a relationship with his son. She said he had forbidden her from contacting us for 3 years because he said I needed to learn my lesson. She said she had gone along with it because that was what she always did. But now she realized she had lost 3 years with me because of his pride. Alyssa did not know what to say to that. She asked if my mother was seriously getting divorced. My mother said she had contacted a lawyer and started the paperwork. She said she was 60 years old and did not want to spend whatever time she had left pretending to be someone she was not. Alyssa asked what that meant. My mother said she had spent 40 years in a social circle that cared about appearances more than substance. She said meeting Alyssa's parents at our wedding made her realize there was a different way to live. But by then she had already burned the bridge with us. Alyssa came home and told me everything. She played parts of the recording. My mother's voice sounded different than I remembered. Quieter. Less certain. Alyssa said she believed my mother was telling the truth about the divorce. I said even if that was true it did not change what happened. Alyssa agreed but said maybe it meant my mother was finally becoming the person she should have been all along. I do not know what to do with this information. My mother has texted me twice since her meeting with Alyssa. Both messages were short. One said she was sorry for not being stronger 3 years ago. The other said she understood if I never wanted to see her again but she hoped I would consider letting her be part of Matthew's life someday. I have not responded to either message. Alyssa thinks we should wait and see if my mother follows through with the divorce. She thinks if my mother actually leaves my father that might prove her regret is real. I think it might just prove my mother wants access to her grandchild badly enough to end her marriage. I do not trust that the woman who called Alyssa inappropriate 3 years ago has suddenly transformed into someone different. Matthew is 6 weeks old and does not know any of this drama exists. He sleeps and eats and looks at us with unfocused eyes. Alyssa's parents visited again yesterday and her father held Matthew for an hour while her mother cooked dinner in our kitchen. That is what grandparents look like to me. People who show up and help without conditions. People who loved Alyssa before she met me and love Matthew because he is hers. My mother wants a chance to be that kind of grandparent. But I do not know if she can be. I do not know if 30 plus years of being one kind of person can be undone because she suddenly realized she was wrong. I do not know if I want to give her the opportunity to hurt Alyssa again or to eventually hurt Matthew when he grows up and makes choices she disagrees with. We are taking things one day at a time. My father has not contacted us since the lawyer's letter. My mother continues sending occasional texts that I do not answer. Alyssa says we should leave the door open a crack in case my mother proves herself over time. I say the door has been closed too long to open safely now. We have not resolved this disagreement. For now Matthew is surrounded by people who love him and that is enough. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My brother-in-law called social services on me after I called his future kids spoiled brats for criticizing my strict parenting rules. He'd been secretly documenting my family for months, building a case against me and my wife. I'm Marcus, 38M, and I've been married to Victoria, 36F, for 12 years. We have twin boys, Jake and Luke, both 11, and a daughter Milo, 9. Victoria and I both work full-time jobs in accounting, and we've built what I consider a solid, structured household. My brother David, 34M, married his girlfriend Tessa, 31F, about 8 months ago. They've been together for nearly 4 years, and honestly, I've never been particularly close to Tessa. She works as a social media manager for some lifestyle brands, which seems to involve a lot of Instagram posts and what she calls influencer partnerships. David thinks her job is amazing, but I've never really understood what she actually does all day. Victoria and I run our household on schedules and rules. The kids wake up at 6:30 a.m. every weekday, do their morning chores, eat breakfast, and get ready for school. After school, they have exactly 1 hour of free time before starting homework. Once homework is finished and checked by either Victoria or me, they can watch 1 hour of television or play video games. Dinner is at 6:30 p.m. sharp, and bedtime is 8:30 p.m. for Milo and 9 p.m. for the twins. Weekends follow a similar structure. Saturday mornings are for household chores. Each kid has age-appropriate tasks like folding laundry, cleaning their rooms, and helping with yard work. Saturday afternoons are for any makeup, homework, or reading. Sunday mornings we attend church as a family, and Sunday afternoons are reserved for family activities or visits with extended family. The kids participate in exactly one extracurricular activity each. Jake plays baseball, Luke is in the school chess club, and Milo takes violin lessons. We believe in commitment, so once they choose an activity for the semester, they stick with it regardless of whether they get bored or find it challenging. Our approach to discipline is straightforward. Breaking rules results in immediate consequences. Talk back to a parent, lose television privileges for 3 days. Forget to do chores, spend the next Saturday doing extra cleaning tasks. Fail to complete homework properly, no fun activities until it's redone to our standards. The kids know exactly what's expected of them, and they generally meet those expectations. David and Tessa have been visiting us more frequently since their wedding. During these visits, Tessa often makes comments about our parenting that have started to wear on both Victoria and me. She'll watch the kids doing their Saturday chores and say things about how childhood should be more carefree. When Milo practices violin for her required 30 minutes each evening, Tessa mentions how music should be enjoyable rather than forced. If one of the twins gets disciplined for not completing their homework correctly, she'll give them sympathetic looks and whisper about how everyone makes mistakes. 3 weeks ago, we had David and Tessa over for Sunday dinner after church. The kids had completed all their weekend requirements and were playing quietly in the living room while the adults talked in the kitchen. Milo came in to ask if she could have a second helping of dessert, and Victoria told her no because she'd already had her portion. This is a standard rule in our house, 1 dessert per meal, no exceptions. Tessa immediately jumped in and said Milo could have more dessert if she wanted it. Victoria politely but firmly repeated that Milo had already had her portion. Tessa then turned to Milo and said she didn't think 1 extra piece of cake would hurt anyone. Milo looked confused and uncomfortable, stuck between her mother's clear instruction and her aunt's contradictory permission. I stepped in and told Milo to go back to the living room with her brothers. Once she left, I explained to Tessa that we don't override each other's parenting decisions in our house, and we'd appreciate the same courtesy from family members. Tessa rolled her eyes and said something about how a little flexibility never hurt anyone. The breaking point came last weekend. David and Tessa came over on Saturday afternoon while the kids were doing their weekly chores. Jake was cleaning the bathroom, Luke was organizing the garage with me, and Milo was folding and putting away laundry. Tessa watched this for about 10 minutes before announcing that she thought it was ridiculous to make children spend their Saturday doing housework. She said kids should be outside playing or having fun with friends, not doing chores that their parents should handle. She added that childhood is short and we were wasting it by turning our kids into little servants. Then she said the part that really got to me, that she felt sorry for Jake, Luke, and Milo because they were missing out on actually being kids. I told Tessa that our children were learning responsibility and the value of contributing to their household. She responded that there were plenty of ways to teach responsibility without making kids spend every weekend cleaning. She said she and David planned to raise their future children very differently, with much more freedom and fun. That's when I snapped. I told Tessa that based on what I'd observed, she and David would probably raise spoiled brats who had no respect for authority and no understanding of hard work. I said our kids were being prepared for real life, while hers would grow up expecting everything to be handed to them without effort. Tessa went completely silent. David immediately got defensive and said I was way out of line. He said Tessa was just trying to be a caring aunt and didn't deserve to be attacked like that. Victoria tried to defuse the situation, but the damage was done. Tessa gathered her purse and left without saying goodbye to anyone, including the kids. David followed her out, but not before telling me I owed his wife a serious apology. My parents called that evening. David had already spoken to them about what happened. They said I was too harsh and that Tessa was probably just trying to bond with the kids. They suggested I apologize and try to smooth things over for the sake of family harmony. They pointed out that David and Tessa don't have children yet, so maybe she doesn't understand how parenting actually works. Victoria supports me but thinks I could have handled it more diplomatically. She agrees that Tessa has been overstepping boundaries, but she also thinks calling someone's future children spoiled brats was unnecessarily cruel. She's worried this incident will create long-term problems between me and David. The kids have asked why Aunt Tessa and Uncle David left early and when they're coming back. I told them that adults sometimes disagree about things, and they accepted that explanation. They haven't mentioned missing the visits or being upset about the situation. I've been thinking about this for a week now. Part of me believes Tessa needed to hear some hard truths about boundaries and respect. She's been undermining our parenting for months, and someone needed to make it clear that her behavior was inappropriate. Our kids are well behaved, respectful, and responsible because Victoria and I maintain consistent rules and expectations. But I also recognize that calling someone's hypothetical future children spoiled brats was probably crossing a line. I wasn't trying to hurt Tessa personally, I was trying to defend our parenting choices and make a point about the importance of structure and discipline. However, I can see how my words came across as a personal attack rather than a defense of our family's values. David sent me a text 3 days ago saying that Tessa is really hurt and doesn't want to come to family gatherings if I'm going to be there. He said I need to decide what's more important, being right or having a relationship with his family. He also mentioned that our parents are planning a big birthday party for our father next month, and Tessa doesn't feel comfortable attending if things aren't resolved between us. So I'm asking, was I the asshole for what I said to Tessa? Should I apologize even though I believe she was completely out of line with her constant criticism of our parenting? Or was I justified in finally standing up for our family's rules and structure? Update 1: I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. The feedback was mixed, but it helped me think through the situation more clearly. A lot of you suggested I should apologize for my harsh words while still maintaining boundaries about our parenting choices. I decided to take that advice. 2 days after my original post, I texted David and asked if I could speak with him and Tessa together. I said I wanted to clear the air before our father's birthday party. David responded that Tessa wasn't ready to talk to me yet, but he would meet me for coffee to discuss the situation. We met at a coffee shop near his office last Tuesday morning. David started by saying that Tessa had been really upset since our argument. He said she'd been crying about it and questioning whether she was cut out to be an aunt or eventually a mother. He emphasized that she was just trying to build relationships with my kids and didn't realize her comments were bothering Victoria and me so much. I apologized for calling her future children spoiled brats. I explained that I was defending our parenting approach, but I acknowledged that my words were hurtful and inappropriate. I told David the first was willing to apologize directly to Tessa and try to rebuild our relationship. David seemed relieved and said he would talk to Tessa about meeting with me. He also said something that surprised me. He mentioned that Tessa had been talking to our mother quite a bit since the incident. Apparently, Mom had been very supportive and understanding about Tessa's perspective on childrearing. This struck me as odd because Mom had always been fairly strict with David and me when we were growing up. We had chores, curfews, and clear expectations about behavior and schoolwork. I asked David what exactly Mom had been saying to Tessa, but he was vague about the details. David arranged for the three of us to meet at his and Tessa's apartment the following Saturday. I arrived with a sincere apology prepared and hoped we could move past the conflict. Tessa accepted my apology but seemed distant throughout our conversation. She said she forgave me but needed time to feel comfortable around me again. During our discussion, Tessa brought up something that caught me completely off guard. She said that my mother had told her some things about how Victoria and I were raising our kids that made her concerned for their well-being. She wouldn't elaborate on exactly what Mom had said, but she implied that other family members shared her worries about our strict household rules. I asked for specifics, but Tessa said she didn't want to create more family drama by repeating conversations. She did say that she wasn't the only one who thought we were being too rigid with Jake, Luke, and Milo. This was news to me because no one in our family had ever directly criticized our parenting before Tessa started making her comments. After I left their apartment, I called my mother immediately. I asked her directly what she had been telling Tessa about our family. Mom initially acted like she didn't know what I was talking about. When I pressed her, she admitted that she and Tessa had talked several times since the incident at our house. Mom said that Tessa had called her after our argument, upset and looking for support. During their conversations, Mom had shared some concerns about our parenting approach that she'd apparently been keeping to herself for years. She said she'd been worried that we were too strict and that the kids seemed overly focused on following rules rather than just being children. I was stunned. Mom had never expressed any concerns about our parenting to Victoria or me directly. When I asked why she hadn't spoken to us about her worries, she said she didn't want to interfere in how we raised our children. But apparently, she felt comfortable sharing her concerns with Tessa, who had been using that information to justify her boundary-crossing behavior. Mom also revealed that she'd been talking to David about our parenting for months. She said David had mentioned that Tessa was concerned about the kids, and Mom had encouraged those discussions. She thought it was good that someone was advocating for Jake, Luke, and Milo to have more freedom and fun. I realized that what I'd thought was Tessa overstepping boundaries was actually part of a larger family discussion that had been happening behind Victoria's and my backs. My own mother and brother had been questioning our parenting choices and encouraging Tessa to intervene on behalf of our children. When I told Victoria about these conversations, she was as shocked as I was. We'd both thought we had family support for our parenting approach. Learning that our closest relatives had been secretly criticizing us and coordinating with Tessa to undermine our household rules was devastating. Victoria called her own mother to see if similar conversations had been happening on her side of the family. Her mom said she'd never discussed our parenting with anyone and was surprised to hear about the situation. She added that she'd always thought we were doing a great job raising the kids and that Jake, Luke, and Milo were some of the most polite and responsible children she knew. The contrast between my family's secret criticism and Victoria's family's open support was stark. I started questioning everything about my relationship with my parents and David. How long had they been having these discussions? What exactly had they been saying about Victoria and me? And why hadn't they come to us directly if they had concerns? I decided to have a direct conversation with my father before his birthday party. I wanted to know if he shared Mom's and David's concerns or if he'd been kept out of these discussions entirely. When I called him, he said he was aware that Mom and David had some worries about our strict household, but he'd stayed out of the conversations because he thought it wasn't his place to comment on our parenting. Dad said he personally thought Victoria and I were doing fine, but he could see why some people might think we were a bit rigid. He was surprised to learn that the discussions had involved Tessa and that she'd been making comments to us based on information from our family members. The birthday party is this weekend, and I'm dreading it. Victoria and I have decided to attend because we don't want to punish my father for something that involves Mom, David, and Tessa. But we're not sure how to handle the situation with the rest of the family. The kids keep asking when they'll see Uncle David and Aunt Tessa again. I've been telling them that sometimes adults need time to work through disagreements, but I don't know what the long-term situation will be. Victoria and I are both hurt by the betrayal of trust from my family members, and we're not sure how to move forward with relationships that apparently included months of secret criticism about our choices as parents. Update 2: The birthday party was a disaster, and everything has gotten much worse since my last update. I need to get this written down because the situation has spiraled completely out of control. Victoria and I attended Dad's birthday party with the kids as planned. We arrived at my parents' house to find that most of the extended family was already there, including David and Tessa. The atmosphere felt tense from the moment we walked in. Tessa was polite but cold when we greeted her. She made small talk with Victoria about work but didn't engage with me at all. The kids ran off to play with their cousins, and I thought maybe we could get through the evening without any major incidents. About an hour into the party, I overheard my Aunt Linda talking to my cousin Janet about our family. Linda was saying something about how strict Victoria and I were with our children and how she'd heard from Mom that the kids weren't allowed to just be kids. Janet responded that she'd noticed how quiet and well-behaved Jake, Luke, and Milo always were at family gatherings, almost like they were afraid to step out of line. I realized that the conversations about our parenting had spread beyond just Mom, David, and Tessa. Apparently, my mother had been discussing our household rules with other family members, and now everyone had opinions about how we were raising our children. When it came time to sing happy birthday to Dad, Jake asked if he could have a second piece of cake after finishing his first slice. Victoria told him he could have more cake since it was a special occasion. Before Jake could respond, Tessa loudly said that of course he could have more cake and that he shouldn't have to ask permission for something so simple. The comment was clearly directed at our normal household rules, and several family members heard it. I saw some of them exchanging looks, and I realized that Tessa was making a point in front of everyone about our parenting. Victoria's face went red, and I could tell she was embarrassed and angry. After the cake incident, I pulled David aside and told him that Tessa's behavior was inappropriate, especially in front of the extended family. David said I was being oversensitive and that Tessa was just trying to make sure Jake felt comfortable asking for what he wanted. That's when David dropped a bombshell. He said that he and Tessa had been documenting instances of what they considered overly strict parenting because they were concerned about the kids' emotional well-being. He said they'd been taking notes about things they witnessed during family visits and discussions they'd had with my parents about our household rules. I asked what he meant by documenting, and David admitted that he'd been keeping a written record of incidents where he thought Victoria and I were being too harsh or rigid with Jake, Luke, and Milo. He said the record included dates, descriptions of what happened, and his concerns about the impact on the children. I was speechless. My own brother had been secretly building a case against Victoria and me as parents. When I asked what he planned to do with this documentation, David got defensive and said it was just for his own reference in case the situation with the kids got worse. The conversation ended when Victoria came looking for me. She said Milo had started crying because some of the adults were talking about whether children should have chores, and Milo thought she was in trouble for doing something wrong. We decided to cut the evening short and took the kids home. During the drive home, Luke asked why Aunt Tessa had said he could have more cake when Mom had already given him permission. Milo wanted to know if she was supposed to do chores or not because the grown-ups couldn't agree. Jake just sat quietly in the back seat, clearly picking up on the tension even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. The next morning, Victoria and I sat down with the kids to explain that sometimes adults disagree about rules, but in our house, Mom and Dad make the decisions about things like chores, homework, and treats. We reassured them that they weren't in any trouble and that the discussions at the party weren't their fault. 2 days after the party, my mother called and said she thought it was time for Victoria and me to consider relaxing some of our household rules. She said the family conversation at the party had convinced her that our approach was causing stress for the children and creating tension at family gatherings. I told Mom that our parenting choices were not up for family discussion or vote. She responded that she was just concerned about her grandchildren and thought we should be open to other perspectives. When I pointed out that she'd been discussing our parenting behind our backs for months, she said she was just trying to help. The phone call ended badly, with Mom saying I was being defensive and closed-minded. She said Tessa and David were just trying to be good aunt and uncle, and that I was creating unnecessary family conflict by refusing to listen to their concerns. Last week, things took an even stranger turn. Victoria received a phone call at work from someone claiming to be from the county social services office. The caller said they'd received a report about potential concerns regarding our children's welfare and wanted to schedule a home visit to discuss the family situation. Victoria was terrified and confused. She asked for details about the report, but the caller would only say that someone had expressed concerns about the children's living conditions and the level of structure in our household. Victoria scheduled the visit for the following week because she didn't know what else to do. We spent the weekend trying to figure out who might have called social services about our family. The timing seemed suspicious, coming so soon after the family conflicts and David's admission about keeping documentation. But we couldn't believe that anyone in our family would take such a drastic step. The social worker visited our home last Tuesday. She was professional and thorough, interviewing Victoria and me separately and then speaking with each of the kids individually. She toured the house, looked at the chore charts and homework stations, and asked detailed questions about our daily routines and discipline methods. The social worker said she found no evidence of abuse or neglect. She noted that our home was clean and organized, the children were healthy and well cared for, and our parenting approach, while structured, was within the range of normal parenting practices. She said the investigation would be closed with no further action required. However, she also told us something that made our blood run cold. She said the person who made the report had provided very specific details about our household routines, including information about chore schedules, homework requirements, and discipline methods. The level of detail suggested that the reporter had extensive knowledge of our family's daily life. After the social worker left, Victoria and I compared notes about what she'd told us. The specific details mentioned in the report matched almost exactly with the types of things David said he'd been documenting during his visits to our house. I called David that evening and confronted him directly about whether he'd contacted social services. He denied it initially, but when I pressed him about the specific details mentioned in the report, he finally admitted that he and Tessa had made the call. David said they'd been increasingly worried about the kids and felt like Victoria and I weren't listening to their concerns. He said the social services call was meant to get an objective professional opinion about our parenting, not to get us in trouble. He claimed they thought a social worker would either validate their concerns or reassure them that everything was fine. I told David that calling social services on his own brother was an unforgivable betrayal. He said he was sorry it had come to that, but he genuinely believed the children needed someone to advocate for them since Victoria and I were unwilling to consider that our approach might be harmful. The conversation ended with me telling David that he and Tessa were no longer welcome in our home or around our children. Victoria and I have decided to go completely no contact with them until further notice. We're also limiting contact with my parents since they were part of the larger pattern of undermining our parenting choices. The kids have noticed that we're not seeing Uncle David and Aunt Tessa anymore. We've explained that sometimes adults have disagreements that take time to resolve, and for now, we won't be spending time with them. Jake, Luke, and Milo seem to accept this explanation and haven't pushed for more details. Update 3: I'm writing this final update because some people have been asking for closure on our situation. Things have settled into a new normal, though not in the way I expected when this all started. The no contact decision with David and Tessa has held firm. We haven't spoken to them since the phone call where David admitted to calling social services. They made one attempt to reach out through my parents about 6 weeks ago, but Victoria and I decided we weren't ready for any communication. My parents initially tried to mediate the situation. Mom called several times asking me to reconsider the no contact decision. She said David and Tessa were genuinely sorry and just wanted what was best for the kids. I told her that calling social services crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and that we needed space from anyone who had participated in the secret discussions about our parenting. Dad took a different approach. He came to our house about a month ago and asked to speak with Victoria and me privately. He said he understood why we were angry and hurt, but he was worried about the long-term impact on family relationships. He asked if there was any way to work toward reconciliation, especially for the kids' sake. I told Dad that the kids were doing fine without the constant criticism and undermining of our household rules. I explained that we'd noticed Jake, Luke, and Milo were actually more relaxed and secure since the family conflict stopped. Without the mixed messages from other adults, they seemed more confident about following our established routines and expectations. Dad listened and said he could see our point. He also admitted that he thought David and Tessa had gone too far with the social services call, even if their intentions were good. He said he would respect our decision about contact but hoped we might reconsider in the future. My relationship with my parents has changed significantly. We still see them occasionally, usually for major family events, but the easy closeness we used to have is gone. I find myself guarding what I say about the kids and our family life because I don't trust that the information won't be shared or criticized later. Mom seems to understand that something fundamental shifted after we learned about her conversations with Tessa and David. She's more careful about offering opinions on our parenting choices, but there's an awkwardness that wasn't there before. She clearly disagrees with our decision to cut contact with David, and that disagreement affects all our interactions. The most surprising development has been how much our household has improved since removing the outside criticism and interference. The kids are following their routines without the confusion that came from hearing different messages from family members. Their homework habits are better, they complete chores without arguing, and bedtime has become much smoother. Jake, Luke, and Milo have each asked a few times when they'll see Uncle David and Aunt Tessa again. We've been honest that it might be a very long time because of adult disagreements that are hard to resolve. They seem to understand and haven't pushed the issue further. Victoria and I have talked extensively about whether our parenting approach needs any adjustments based on everything that happened. We've concluded that while we're open to evolving our methods as the kids grow, we're comfortable with our current structure and expectations. The social worker's assessment confirmed that our approach, while strict, is appropriate and effective. We've also realized how much the constant second-guessing from family members was affecting our confidence as parents. Without those voices telling us we were too rigid or too demanding, we've been able to focus on what works for our specific children and our family's needs. The extended family dynamics have settled into a new pattern as well. Other relatives have stopped bringing up parenting topics around us, probably because they realize the subject causes tension. Family gatherings are more superficial but also more peaceful. David sent me a text message 2 weeks ago saying he missed having a relationship with me and the kids. He said he still believed he'd been trying to help, but he acknowledged that the social services call was a mistake that destroyed trust between us. He asked if we could meet to talk about moving forward. I haven't responded to the text. Victoria and I discussed it, and we both feel that we're not ready for that conversation. The betrayal of having my own brother build a case against our parenting and then involve government agencies in our family life is still too raw. We've built a good life for our children based on structure, expectations, and consistent rules. The criticism and interference from family members was undermining that stability and confusing the kids about what was expected of them. Removing those conflicting voices has made our household calmer and more secure. I don't know if we'll ever have a normal relationship with David and Tessa again. The trust is broken in a way that's hard to repair. But I'm comfortable with our decision to prioritize our children's well-being and our family's stability over maintaining relationships with people who couldn't respect our parenting choices. Jake, Luke, and Milo are thriving with clear expectations and consistent messaging from the adults in their lives. That's what matters most to Victoria and me. Sometimes protecting your family means making difficult choices about which relationships to maintain and which ones to step away from.